Are you married or in a committed relationship looking for real advice on having love and enriching your relationship? You are in the right place. Welcome to The Couples Expert with Stuart Fensterheim.
Hello, it's Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert, and welcome to the podcast. This episode today is a different one than I've had before. Normally, I bring on the show therapists and people like that, but I ran across this woman recently who has written a book. Her name is Amy Lyle. Amy is a run-of-the-mill woman who has a perspective on marriage that I thought was really, really fascinating. What the book in essence is about is that even the most ordinary things have an incredible sense of humor attached. And if we have an attitude that is about life and playfulness and fun, that you can get through just about anything as a couple where the two of you really feel significant and important to one another. What I want to tell you about Amy is that she has the right attitude. I send everyone who's going to be a guest a general registration booking form. That form is to give me a good sense of who you are, a bit about how they fit into the Couples Expert podcast and what they can offer some of the listeners to the show. Her title alone enthralled me. What I mean by that is when she filled out her booking form, she filled it out this way. She put her first name, which is Amy, her last name, Lyle, and her title as domestic disaster. Now let's think about that. Someone who would put down on a registration form and call herself domestic disaster, that's someone I want to speak with. Now, her background is really interesting. She actually was a trainer for some staffing companies, and she quit her job to stay home with her blended family. Think about that also. And what she realized rather quickly, that decision might not have been the best decision that she ever made. Now, blended families have their own unique problems. And Amy had written a book recently called A Book of Failures. What I love about it, it's a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek book regarding how all of us are living these lives, and it doesn't always run smooth. But it's your attitude that you have to think about. And if you have the right attitude, you can get through just about anything. And that's why I wanted her on this show, because she offers all of us a good perspective on how do we get through the challenges of life and keep a great sense of humor about it. So, Amy, I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you very much for coming on the show and being willing to be one of my first guests that is not a counselor or a mental health provider, because what I think you have to offer my audience, different than some others, is a very realistic attitude about life, about family, and about marriage. So, Amy, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on the show. I am so excited to be here.
It is really fun to have you, because one of the things that I have never really been able to do is talk to someone, and we were talking a bit that I called you this run-of-the-mill woman, and that you're everyday person, and we all have our own unique qualities, obviously. But, you know, one of the things that we don't get enough of an ability to do on this show is talk to someone who's really been in the trenches doing it, not from a professional perspective, but from a real-life perspective. And I'm really thrilled, and you wrote this book, and so why don't we start with you talking a bit about your background and a bit about why the heck you decided to write this book in the first place.
Okay, well, shockingly, I wrote the book. It came out of a failure. You know, the book is the Book of Failures. I had made the decision, it was the wrong decision, but I had made the decision to stay home with 4 kids after working for 20 years in a sales capacity. And I was a little restless. So I took an acting job for a local nonprofit giant group. And then I started writing for that group. And that gave me the bug to write more. And I wrote a screenplay oddly, after a lake weekend with a mixed group of women. Some were stay-at-home moms and some were working moms. Some were married and divorced and remarried. Everybody had one time been married. Everybody had kids. And I just thought it would be so funny to explore in a really funny way, kind of like a bridesmaids meets bad moms way, this relationship and perception that people have of if you're the working mother, these preconceived notions versus if you're a stay-at-home mother, these preconceived notions. So anyway, I wrote that under the mentorship of a great guy. He had vetted films for Disney for 10 years. He kept the film structurally sound. And when I was done, he said, "Hey, I'm going to hand you over to my entertainment attorney." And he did. The guy's out in LA, and he picked up the phone when I called him. He said, "Yes, I knew that you were going to call me." He said, "I'm really sorry, but you can't just waltz into Hollywood. I'm not going to represent you. You're nobody. You don't have any money." And I said, after a long pause, I said, "That makes me very sad." There was an expletive in there. I won't say how sad I was, but I was the saddest you could be, Stuart. And he started laughing. He said, "Let me give you some free advice." He said, "You need to get on the map. You need to write a book or do a blog, but you need to be very searchable." And it was great advice. And I've been in sales. I've heard no before, and it didn't hurt my feelings. I was like, "Oh, you want a book? I'll give you a book." And I started writing that book that day. And my mind immediately went to, I have had a lot of failures. And so that's how the book came to be.
And the failures that you chose to do had to do with your own personal life and your own family, it sounds like.
Yes, it's everything from marriage, remarriage, getting fired from jobs, friendships. I mean, anything, kids, stepkids. I have a few funny fights in there with my husband. Anything you can imagine. It really is. When you said Amy is a run-of-the-mill woman, it is a run-of-the-mill woman book. A lot of people say that to me. They're like, "Do you have a camera on me? Like, this is what's going on in my house." All these, we seem normal from the outside, but if you go inside, there's a lot of chaos.
And sometimes, and I think you might be able to relate to this, it's the dichotomy of what's going on outside your life and what's going on inside internally with your own sense of self. And that conflict sometimes in and itself is the crazy making part.
Yes, I personally don't sign up for that because, I'm doing kind of like a speaking tour right now. And the name of the tour is Why I Shared My Most Mortifying Moments and Why You Should Too. And, every Friday on Facebook, I have a fail of my own, a Friday fail. So my mission is to rip off the veil of what's going on and really behind the scenes, and everybody is doing the best they can to be a mom and employee and a wife and maintain friendships. We're all doing the best we can, and it comes in all shapes and sizes. And you know what? You're not doing as poorly as you think you're doing. And if you think you're doing awesome, you're probably not doing as awesome as you think you're doing either. Right?
One of the things I do with couples in my couples counseling is really help people go from a place of disconnection to a place of connection. And one of my mantras really is about, if you really want to have a marriage that works, there's really only two things you have to concentrate on: being the most authentic person you can be and the most vulnerable person you can be. And I don't know if you've ever heard of this woman, Brené Brown.
Yes, I love Brené Brown.
Brené Brown is so wonderful because she talks a lot about just getting on the stage of life and just living your life without judgment, right, without prejudgment, without letting yourself get caught up into what other people think. And that's really how we can have a happy life.
Yes, I actually quote her when I do my little talk, because something that she said sometimes people get the wrong impression that, I did write a book and share some very, very embarrassing things about myself. And so sometimes when people meet me, they feel like we have a more intimate relationship than we do because they've read some really intimate, embarrassing things about me, and I've opened that can of worms and I can't close it. But normally I enjoy very much what they're saying. But she was saying, and this is a great point, be authentic, be more authentic, get away from the, where do you live? What do you do? All those are kind of socioeconomic things. And if you're not on the top of that, it can hurt your feelings and you feel less than. But if you're, showing up saying, oh my goodness, I was running out the door and I accidentally have a blue shoe on and a black shoe on, I'm probably going to like you and hang out with you. But she said, this was her advice. I love it. She said, you can't tell a new person your deepest, darkest secrets because they haven't earned the right to hear that yet. But her point is, be authentic and your relationships could grow to that level, which I like.
Yeah, whether it's a friend or whether it's a lover,
right.
It's the same thing. And also be careful because there are some people out there that go right to vulnerability without knowing whether it's safe to do that, because the sad part of our world is not everyone respects when someone gets vulnerable.
Well, I mean, you say that that's a real thing. We have 3 teenage girls. We have 4 kids, and we have three are girls. And I'm not making light of this. This is very serious. Something flashed on my daughter's screen, and it was somebody saying, "Send me a nude." And so I freaked out. I knew the parents, and I was like, I'm going to call the mother. This is ridiculous. How dare this child, ask you to send a nude photograph of yourself. All 3 of my girls, one's in college, one's a senior in high school, and one's a freshman, said, if you had to call the parents of all the boys that asked us for nudes, that's all you would do all day. It has become such a disrespectful thing. It's like asking somebody to have a cup of coffee. These teenage boys, like, send me a nude. It's like, are you insane? Are you insane? We're like, if you do that, you know that's out there forever. You can never take it back.
Right. And dealing with things like embarrassing moments in a family is something we do every single day. And how do we sort of deal with that and have the right attitude without getting crazy? And that's why this whole book of failures, I think, is such a wonderful thing you're doing, because what you're really doing is normalizing, and that how we define failure isn't just really failing. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but I think we have to look at how do we define failure.
Our kids go to a very competitive public school in North Georgia. The schools, the average ACT scores are normally 30. Really, they're very smart kids. A lot of people go Ivy League, a lot of people getting into the academies. So there's this pressure, and I started to see my kids not taking a challenging course because they feared they might get a B. They didn't want to mess up their GPA. And that's no way to live. You're not going to live and die by your high school grades. You're going to get into a college. You could transfer to another one later. But if you're going to live your life to avoid failure, I think you probably won't have a lot of fulfillment, because I don't know about your early career out of college, but some of it's you're just trying to find out what you don't like and what you're not good at. Okay, I'm not good at that. So I got to do something else.
And probably the saddest story I have to tell that have really prompted me, quite honestly, to go into counseling is I had friends in high school that basically were twins and sadly ended up killing themselves. And this goes back a lot of years now. I'm 62 and, I graduated high school in 1973. And what we learned and what I learned is the reason that they did that is they ended up with a B in the class.
Oh, my goodness.
Isn't that sort of like, that's the world, I think, and that's in the 70s. Imagine now with everything's changed. And that's why I love what you're doing, is because what you're really doing is taking some of those kinds of crazy belief systems and saying, let's laugh about it. Right.
It's not the end of the world. It's not. And even if it's the most embarrassing thing in the world, like somebody videotapes you at an event, I'm speaking from a teenager perspective, and, post that on Snapchat or whatever, you know what, this too shall pass. And somebody else will be the victim of that within hours. So you just have to wait it out. Obviously we don't want any of our children in putting themselves in danger or embarrassing things, but it is not the end of the world if something like that happens. And it's so tragic that some of these children believe my world is ending because their world is kind of social media, and they're feeling the pressure from everyone around them, I guess.
And then when we start talking about families and parenting, Like I have a story of one of my kids when they were little, they were standing in the backyard and they peed over the wall
Right.
to the neighbors.
Right.
And it landed on someone.
Oh my goodness. No.
At the time, it's like, oh my God, I want to punish this kid big time. But there's also that other side of you that just wants to roll
Right.
in laughter and go,
Right.
oh my God, what else can go wrong?
We're going to have to move now.
We're going to have to move or really finding the humor in things. And I guess that's one of the questions I do have for you is you've done such a wonderful job being able to do that. How do you go about finding that humor so that we do have the attitude that's going to say, this too shall pass?
Well, I think, and you're the therapist, so you'll probably say, that's right, Amy. But wouldn't you say that most comedians, they don't come from normal families? I don't know of any comedian that has like, my childhood was great. I mean, I don't, can you name one? No. So a lot of times comedy comes out as a coping method. It's the way, and it's a blessing and a curse. I literally can see humor in everything. I mean, if I'm at a funeral, I was at a funeral recently, and the minister had a tie, and I think it had bass fish on it, was on the tie, and I couldn't move. I couldn't listen to what he said. I couldn't move past. Like, did he come from a fishing tournament? Did the deceased family give him that bass tie? Like, why would you be wearing a tie with a fish on it at a funeral? And then, I mean, it was just, that's not appropriate for me to think that way, but that's how comedians' minds work. We can find comedy at a funeral.
And I think the most funny things, for me at least, because I recall this at a comedy show I went to recently, was this person was able to just really bring you to your life in real time, real day, and the little things, which are the most funny.
Oh, sure. That's the truth is the funniest. Always. The truth is the funniest. And that's why I'm just so thrilled with people, saying, you make me feel like I, as a mother and as a wife, that I suck less, period. And I just, that cracks me up. I'm like, you're welcome. Because we all are struggling. And it's so funny what people are drawn to in the book, what stories, like what they relate to. Like one woman, I was at a book club lately. They did my book. I was a guest. It was so fun. And invite your local authors to your book clubs. And it was so funny. Like one woman's like, oh my gosh, that fight that you had with your husband about borrowing his razor. Oh my gosh, almost had the exact same, try to dangle something to get him off, hey, look over here. So the fight will end or whatever, you'll distract him. Or another person's like, oh my gosh, I read all of your things that annoy you. Every single thing on your list annoys me too. Or, being a stepmom and, oh my gosh, it's like you live in my house. So that makes me feel good.
Tell the story about the razor, because not everyone may have read your book. And I think that is like a drop down funny story.
Oh my gosh, I have the book right here. I should open it, but it's 267 pages and I don't know where to find it. But basically I walked by my husband, he's in the shower, and he said, did you use my razor on your legs? And I had used his razor actually on my lady parts, but I didn't want to admit that. So I tried to distract him, and I was like, you have a little bit of a lisp. Did you ever go to speech therapy as a child? And he's like, Amy, did you use my razor on your legs? And I was like, no, I used it on my lady parts. But did you hear that when you said legs? It kind of sounded like legs, kind of like a there. You're putting your tongue, too close to your teeth. That's a speech impediment. You need to work on that. And he's like, why? When you've done something, do you always turn it back on me? And then meanwhile, I'm like, bye. But, that's an average, I don't take criticism very well, and I'm not very good at saying I'm sorry, but I am working on it.
The funny part about all of that is we all do that stuff. When we're in a relationship, especially, what's yours is mine. And I remember, the whole classic, what's yours is mine and what's mine is mine. So, stay off mine.
That's what it is in my house. What's yours is mine and what's mine is mine.
But it's sort of like we do these things And in some ways, it's endearing. In some ways, it can get us crazy. But I think the whole point of all of this is really finding the avenue where you can begin to say, we have a life where everything is out there, and I am who I am, and you are who you are, and let's just laugh at life and make that be what matters, and not whether or not you shouldn't have used it on your lady parts.
Well, my husband is a engineer, a Georgia Tech engineer, and he is very, very serious minded. And he thinks, he has given me a lot of confidence. I don't know if I would have the confidence to write a book like that, or a confidence to be an actress. I don't really know if I would. He really, really loves me unconditionally, regardless of what I do. He kind of wakes up in the morning and he's like, okay, let's do this one more time. He has a great attitude. And he's getting better at letting me direct it at him, because our fights and things they make for funny cocktail party interaction, the stuff that goes on, like particularly a blended family and the way we raise our kids. And, my husband is very much like, if someone does something that lacks integrity, like maybe not finish their chores, he's an industrial engineer. So he wants to talk to them as he does his physician clients. And we have to tell him, we're not paying you, but he wants to say stuff like, integrity, it's, the quality of being honest and, moral principle. And then you might quote scripture, like, 2 Samuel, like his intentions are so honorable, but you know how teenagers are, they check out in 1 minute. And versus my philosophy is, it's like, oh, hey, you didn't clean your room. Yeah, you're not going out. Okay, bye. I'm not invested like that. They know what they're supposed to do and they're not doing it. And so I'm not going to internalize that on myself, but he cares so much that he really, he wouldn't do it if he didn't think it would help them. But I vote they're not listening when he says that, but maybe some of it's sinking in.
I think one of the funniest bits I've ever heard, which is interesting, and I really feel sad right now that I have to even put this caveat out there, because people have very mixed feelings about this comedian at this stage in what's happened in our world. But Bill Cosby.
Oh, I know he's got problems, but he's a comedic genius, of course.
His bit, and you can find it online, I'm sure, called Bill Cosby. I believe it's Bill Cosby himself. Mm-hmm. Where he talks about kids having brain damage.
Right.
And he talks about things like you tell a child to do something and then they don't do it, and you turn to him and say, Dad, I didn't, what do you mean? And I can't remember exactly what he does, but it's a classic.
He's like, they've got the brain damage. He kind of hesitates. They've got brain damage.
Got brain damage. And that, and part of what happens is, as adults, we start questioning our own insanity on whether or not we've said what we've said, because they said we hadn't said it, and we know we did, but they're pretty good at convincing us. And he just has this whole bit about parenting. And I think there's nothing more funny or comical when your family just is going crazy if you were not in the family.
Yes, it is. I mean, it's not funny when it's happening, right? That's not funny. But that bit is so funny. I know I get people ask me the question a lot, what do my kids think about being in the book? Because I put really embarrassing things in there. Like at any given moment, our middle daughter, I put a picture in the book because there was a bowl of shrimp bisque and a ham sandwich with a giant knife in her desk drawer. There was a smell coming in her room. I'm like, what? It was a bowl of shrimp bisque in a desk drawer. And, but she just laughs about it now. It was a few years ago. And then this is a really gross story. One time my husband and I, we had the kids, we were going to Verizon, the store, and the son, he was maybe 10, was being ugly to everyone and said, you sit right here. And literally we could see him from the store, right? It wasn't a safety issue. We could see him. And we said, don't you dare move out of this car. You're going to stay in this car while we go, get this phone situation. Well, then we come back in and it smells. I mean, it smells. And so when the kids are, it's like, oh my gosh, it smells like poo. And he holds up this Target bag, and he has defecated in a bag, and he smirks at us like, you told me not to leave the car. And it's disgusting. It's disgusting. And for years I couldn't talk about it, but now, years down the road, I can talk about in front of him. And he was like, well, you told me to stay in the car. I don't know, you may want to cut that whole part out, Stuart, but I was just thinking of the most ridiculous thing that's happened in my life, and it came to mind. It's disgusting.
Yeah,
Kids are gross.
it's things like that. And then I have this story that I love to tell when we were growing up, is we didn't have the money to really fly. So everywhere we went, we drove. So we would drive from New York to Florida. And, there are stretches that have no rest areas.
Right.
And you're running behind and you need to get to where you're trying to get to. So we're driving around, and literally, as a boy, my kids had to go to the bathroom.
Right.
And so I handed one of them a bag, the boy,
and there she goes.
And basically
exactly.
pee in the bag. And so the bag is sitting in the car, and guess what happens? Of course, the bag breaks. And so I have to get out of the car, clean the car. Stories like that are just treasures.
That's how I think. Some people, my mother does not think that is a treasured story, but I think that is a treasured story. My mother would be mortified.
It's such real life.
Yes, I love real life. And that's my sister and I, we were comedians by the time we were 5 years old. And, what was our bit? We're imitating our parents, right? We're imitating our parents arguing. We're imitating my dad. He's like, stop giggling, girls. Nothing can be that funny. Stop giggling. And, that just makes us laugh even more. And, it's a coping. I grew up, my parents were very stoic German, and, you were kind of, to be seen and not heard. But anyway, so that makes for a very rich environment for children to imitate. I mean, that's usually how people start out, as they imitate their family.
So in terms of your humor, you take real life situations and then you just look for the really funny part, right?
Yes, exactly.
How do you determine, I've never really had the opportunity to ask a comedian this, how do you determine what's too far?
Well, if you're in a stand-up environment, you will know immediately if you've gone too far, because you'll lose the audience. That's the great thing about stand-up comedy, is you know right away. That's why, the rule is you do one proven joke, and then you can try something new, and then you sandwich it in between another proven joke if you're trying to sneak in something new. But otherwise, they'll just fall quiet. You'll know that it failed and you went too far. But in a book, I didn't know that, obviously, so I hired a fantastic content editor, and she did cut it down. It was over 50,000 words, and she cut it down to about 39,000.
Your book, it seems like, has been quite successful, which is wonderful for you and for the world, because that's how I sort of see this.
Yes, thank you. It's been a bestseller in every category. The most books that I sell are ebooks, and to see, I'm a mom of 4 living in the suburbs, and to see my book next to, Trevor Noah and Kevin Hart and Anna Kendrick and Jenny Lawson is amazing. It's so exciting. And it's like they have 5,000, 10,000 reviews. I have, 158.
What would you say has been the hardest challenge for you in terms of determining as an author what's too far in terms of your family?
I say I'm going to answer as Nora Ephron, the famous playwright, would answer. Nora Ephron wrote, When Harry Met Sally and many different books. And her story is, she was in 7th grade and had her heart broken. Her parents were both playwrights. And she came home and she was telling them the sad story of how this boy broke her heart. And her parents were taking notes, basically. And that made her angry. And they said, you don't understand, given enough time, everything is copy. Everything is copy in this house. And so I hate to say it, but I don't think, I put a story where I had a 70s party for my husband. And one guest was very generous, and she gave me these gourmet lollipops. And I throw the gourmet lollipops in my drawer. I hide my candy in the drawer because we have so many kids. If you put candy out, they'll eat it in 1 second. So I put the gourmet lollipops in there. And months later, my daughter's at the dinner table, and she's accusing me of doing drugs because she ate one of those lollipops and became high. And I was like, what? Where are the lollipops? And so maybe some people think that's going too far in the family, but I thought it was a hilarious story. I didn't even know they were pot laden lollipops. They were edibles, basically. Somebody had gifted me. I'm like, fantastic. I've never done that, but
I actually deal with it also myself on this podcast. Obviously my kids know. So I'm sitting here going, okay, the story I just told, I wonder how they're going to think about that. Because we go about living our lives, and I also do a lot of video, and they go, Dad, this cannot go on your podcast.
Oh my gosh, Stuart, you say that? One time my daughter was in trouble. I forget. We were in the kitchen and she said something very, very disrespectful. And I just happened to be using aluminum foil. And I said, if you say that one more time, I'm going to whack you with this aluminum foil. And she got right in my face and said it again. So I whacked her with it, not hard, not abusively, just to kind of get her attention. And she immediately started crying. And I said, that didn't hurt. And she goes, no, it didn't hurt, but I don't want you to put that in one of your books. She's like, please don't put in your books that you whack me with aluminum foil. And I didn't tell the story for many months, but now I'm like, time has passed.
It's going in the book.
It's going in the book now. It's going on the podcast.
Everything's fair game.
Everything is fair game. And you know what I tell them? You can tell your kids this too. You know what? You can put that in your book.
That's right.
You don't like it? You can put that in your book.
And I remember when my kids were little, I said, all right, when you get older and you have your own shrink, then you could tell them.
Exactly. Listen, I have to give you something to talk about with your therapist. Okay, think of it as that. I have to give you something to talk about. And then the one time she tapped me on the shoulder with a giant box of aluminum foil, and I was humiliated. Yeah, exactly.
It's true. You don't have to give up on your relationship or settle for feeling lost or as if something is missing. You just need to know how to connect with your partner in a way that allows the two of you to feel loved and appreciated. But the problem is that many couples don't have the tools they need to navigate the ups and downs of a relationship without causing relationship injuries to one another. Yet they wonder what happened to the friendship that you used to share. How did it get from where it was in the beginning of the relationship to where you are now, feeling alone, disappointed, and hurt? And yet, you just can't seem to move forward to be happy again. Thankfully, this problem can be fixed, and that's where the 2 days and 7 conversation Hold Me Tight workshop comes in. Just 2 days, you will understand what you and your partner need to have a relationship where both of you are on the same page, working together to have that close relationship you only once dreamed of. Check it out at www.thecouplesexperts.com. Your relationship deserves the two of you feeling that closeness you once had. To get a little bit more serious here, I do think our world has turned into everything is just so heavy, and people suing for this and people suing for that, and I think we all need to get more of a sense of humor. So in a lot of ways, I see what you offer and what you do with your book is therapy for people.
Thank you. It is, I've gotten some criticism, and you put yourself out there publicly, you're going to get criticism. And, one person said, well, you're a high income woman with very low impact problems. And, part of that may be true. I don't have children with drug addiction. I'm very, very, very fortunate that our kids are run of the mill kids too. They're normal teenagers. But you know what? I'm a lover of books. I love Angela's Ashes, Frank McCourt. I love reading about real problems in the world. I love that. And it's important, but you can also take a break from the world and renew your mind and your soul and your heart a little bit, because how are you going to go out and fight the battles if you are just depleted? And so that's the way I look at it. Just like you said, you can take a little bit of a break from the world and read a funny book or watch a funny show. And the problems will still be there when you're done with your show or your book.
And I think, you talked earlier about doing some theater or acting. Mm-hmm. And I did that too early in my life. Went to the Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York and was trying.
Oh, wow.
That was sort of my first effort at a career. trying to do acting, which after a 6-hour cattle call and someone said, sorry, you can't even read because you're the wrong height. That sort of said, maybe I need to think about this a little bit.
Stuart, our experiences are very different. You're at the Academy of Performing Arts in New York City, and I am at Brownsbridge Church in front of 300 second graders. So our experiences as actors are very, very different. However, I am recognized a lot in grocery stores.
Right. My point, though, was that part of just learning to be an actor was about losing yourself in a role. And I think one of the things books offer a lot of the clients that I work with right now is if you find something like your book, an ability to relate your life to and look at the humor in it, I really believe it's as good as therapy with regards to being able to take your life that may not be going so well, and for that few moments, just like a movie, to really get and live another life and live another existence, and then recharge yourself and say, you know what, one more day I can get through because I've read this book. And there is such a wonder in that. And I thank you for that.
I hope so. I hope that's the case. And I hope they laugh. And on a very, very serious note, we saw this recently with the Harvey Weinstein scandal and with the Me Too movement and millions of people coming forward. There is something magical when you expose something vulnerable about yourself and someone says, I did that too. I put a story in there. I fell down 2 flights of steps at work. My high heel got caught on the carpet, and it was a violent, turning, screaming fall. And then I slid literally on the marble floor. And when my leg was tucked under me, my skirt suit was up to my bra. I had underwear on that said Happy Buns with a picture of cheeseburgers, and the whole accounting department was like looking over the railing. I'm not making this up. Jill Satterley, my boss, she can vouch for me. And so I hobbled to my car. Okay, of course, I hobbled to my car, realized my purse was upstairs, had to hobble back up the steps, get my purse, go back down. Went into my building. I lived on the 20th floor. And in the building, there was a woman in there, and she had laundry because we lived in studios, and the laundry was in the basement. So anyway, I get in there, I'm humiliated, and I tell her what happened. I fell down these 2 flights of steps. My underwear everybody was looking at my underwear. I'm so humiliated. I can't go back to work. And she listened and she nodded. And then she said, but did you break your tooth? And I said, no, I didn't break my tooth. And then she proceeded to tell me the story where she did break her tooth. So it made me feel better. It made me feel better that she had fallen and actually broke her tooth and was like bleeding on things. So I think there's a great power in sharing your most embarrassing moments.
And what I sort of have decided for myself in my practice and in my life, really, because I think at least how I try to present myself as authentically, both personally and professionally, is if I do that, as you were saying, and other people do that, then we all sort of fit together. And I struggled at one point, and there's comedy in this also, that I've been divorced. So the people that come see me are seeing someone who's failed at marriage, So I want to teach you how to do that, but I'm going to teach you how to fail at marriage. But then how do you pick yourself up and then create something incredible? And that's what I've done, is I've done that both personally in creating an incredible marriage that I now have and helping others not have to feel like if you get a divorce, your world and your ability to have a healthy marriage goes away. So, Amy, thanks for coming on. I really want to just thank you for being willing to reach out and for us to be able to have a conversation like this. What I'd like my audience to be able to do is, and the listeners I'm sure are going to be dying to get your book, what's the best way for them to get that, and what are some of the other things that you're working on? Maybe you can share some of that.
Sure. If they want to buy the book, they can buy it in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, and it's available on Amazon.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah. And as far as some other things I'm working on, if your listeners would be so kind to share some failures with me, I'm doing another book called The Failures of My Friends. It's so funny. And think of it as like a chicken soup for the soul, but all failures. And, my book is funny. I had to come up with, a lot of failures, but everyone has at least one hilarious failure.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we do. Do you have a website or something?
I do. My website is www.amylyle.me. And I had to pick .me because .com was taken. That's not a narcissistic thing. amylyle.me. And then my Facebook page is the same, amylyle.me, just to try to keep it the same. And then I'm on Twitter, Amy Lyle as well.
All right, terrific. And obviously when the podcast goes live, I'll be sharing that on social media as well. And on my show notes for those that are listening to this in their car, please don't write this down while you're driving. It will be on the show notes, and I will put a link to all those things that Amy just mentioned. So, Amy, thank you so very much for coming on the show.
Thank you. And I'm thrilled that I'm your first clinician, and all of your listeners are going to be like, I think I can help her.
There you go.
Problems.
That's right.
They're going to be commenting like, she needs therapy. You are correct. I do.
All right. Thank you again for coming, and thank you all for listening. And of course, please stay connected.
Thank you for listening. This episode has ended, but your journey continues. Head over to www.thecouplesexperts.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. Enjoyed this episode? Why not hit subscribe now and never miss an episode?